My name is Diana Harper. I'm 62 years old, and I never imagined the greatest heartbreak of my life would come from my own son on his wedding day. I was standing in the church lobby holding a garment bag when my son looked me in the eye and said something I will never forget. "Mom, you can't sit in the front row." At first, I thought I had misheard him. The church was crowded. Wedding coordinators rushed back and forth. Guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Music floated through the hall. I smiled. "What do you mean?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder to make sure nobody important was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "Rebecca's family doesn't know much about you." I waited. Surely there was more. Surely my son was about to explain. Instead, he adjusted his tie and said the sentence that split my heart clean down the middle. "We'd prefer if you sat in the back." The world seemed to stop moving. For a moment, I could only stare at him. The little boy I had once carried through emergency rooms. The teenager I worked 3 jobs to support. The young man whose college tuition I paid with money I earned cleaning office buildings at midnight. He wouldn't even let me sit near him at his wedding. I swallowed hard. Why? His jaw tightened. Rebecca's mother had that effect on people. She could make grown adults nervous without raising her voice. "They think you're..." He hesitated. Then he finished. "Different. Different. Not poor. Not embarrassing. Not unwanted. Different. A softer word. A cleaner word. A crueler one." I looked down at my dress. Navy blue. Simple. Elegant. Nothing flashy. I had saved for months to buy it. Not because I wanted attention. Because I wanted Ethan to be proud of me. Instead, he couldn't even look at me. "I don't understand," I said quietly. His eyes darted toward the ballroom. "Rebecca's father owns several companies. So they're very particular." Particular. Another soft word. Another sharp knife wrapped in silk. I finally understood. Rebecca's family had discovered I worked as a housekeeper. And they were ashamed of it. Not ashamed enough to cancel the wedding. Just ashamed enough to hide me. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to change the shape of my heart forever. "Where should I sit?" Ethan pointed. "The last row. Near the doors. Near the people who arrived late. Near the strangers. As far away from him as possible." "Mom, please don't make this difficult." The words hit harder than anything else. Because I had spent 34 years making life easier for him. And now my pain was an inconvenience. I nodded. Not because I agreed. Because I suddenly understood something important. My son had already made his choice. The wedding coordinator appeared. "Ethan, they're ready." His face immediately brightened. The tension vanished. He smiled. Not at me. At the future he wanted. Then he walked away. And left me standing alone. I should tell you something. I wasn't always a housekeeper. Years earlier, my husband and I had owned a successful financial consulting firm. Nothing enormous. Nothing that made headlines. But enough to provide a comfortable life. Enough to raise a family. Enough to dream. Then one rainy Tuesday changed everything. A drunk driver crossed the center line. My husband never came home. I buried him 6 days later. And discovered grief isn't the hardest thing about losing someone. The hardest thing is surviving afterward. The business collapsed within 18 months. Clients left. Investments dried up. Debt grew. I sold the office. Sold the second car. Sold jewelry. Sold dreams. Eventually, I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning houses. Washing floors. Scrubbing bathrooms. People assume work becomes easier when you're desperate. It doesn't. It becomes heavier. Because every hour reminds you of what you've lost. But I never complained. Because Ethan was still young. And he deserved a future. I missed birthdays. Worked holidays. Skipped vacations. Sometimes I slept 4 hours a night. Sometimes less. When Ethan needed braces, I found the money. When Ethan needed college tuition, I found the money. When Ethan needed a place to live after graduation, I found the money. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile, because that's what mothers do. We trade pieces of ourselves for pieces of our children's future. The mistake is believing they'll remember the price. The wedding ceremony began. Guests filled the front rows. Rebecca's wealthy relatives occupied entire sections. Expensive watches flashed beneath church lights. Designer handbags rested on polished laps. Everyone looked exactly where they belonged. Everyone except me. I sat alone in the back. 3 rows from the exit. Watching my own son get married from a distance usually reserved for strangers. The minister began speaking. People smiled. People cried. People celebrated. And somehow, despite all the noise, I felt invisible. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly man sat beside me. I hadn't seen him arrive. He wore a dark suit. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of face that notices things. He glanced toward the front row. Then toward me. Interesting. I frowned. What is? He nodded toward Ethan, the groom. I smiled sadly. That's my son. The man's eyebrows rose. Really? There was something about the way he said it. Something strange, as if he'd just solved a puzzle. A long silence followed. Then he asked a question nobody else had ever bothered asking. Are you okay? 4 words. That was all. 4 words. And suddenly I felt tears threatening to rise. Not because I was weak. Because kindness feels shocking when you've spent years being overlooked. I looked away. I'll survive. The old man studied me carefully. Then he nodded. I believe you will. The ceremony continued, but he didn't leave, and before the night was over, that stranger would reveal a secret that connected him to my family in a way I never could have imagined. A secret my son had spent 10 years trying to bury. And when the truth finally surfaced, the wedding would become the beginning of the end. The wedding ceremony ended with applause. People stood. Music swelled. Rebecca kissed Ethan. Guests smiled and reached for their phones. From a distance, it looked perfect. The kind of wedding people post online with captions about love, destiny, and family. But perfection has a weakness. It cannot survive the truth. The elderly man beside me remained seated while everyone else stood. His eyes stayed fixed on Ethan. Not with affection, not with admiration, with recognition, the kind that comes from knowing something you were never supposed to know. I gathered my purse and prepared to leave. I didn't want to attend the reception anymore. My son had made it clear where I belonged. And it wasn't beside him. As I turned, the old man spoke. Your husband's name was Daniel Harper, wasn't it? My heart skipped. I froze. Slowly, I looked back at him. How do you know that? He stood. For a moment, he seemed almost emotional. I knew your husband. The words hit me like a gust of cold air. Daniel had been gone nearly 11 years. Most people who knew him had drifted away. Life does that. Time turns friends into memories. Yet here stood a stranger speaking his name. My name is Charles Whitmore, he said. The name meant nothing to me. At least not immediately. Then a distant memory surfaced. A Christmas party. A business dinner. A photograph. My eyes widened. You were one of Daniel's clients. Charles nodded. One of his first. I remembered. Years ago, before the accident, Daniel had helped a struggling entrepreneur organize his finances. That entrepreneur later became extremely successful. His company grew nationwide. I had only met him twice. But I remembered his kindness. You became very successful, I said. A sad smile crossed his face. More successful than I ever expected. We stood quietly. Then Charles glanced toward the reception hall. You should know something. The seriousness in his voice made my stomach tighten. What? He hesitated, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. I recognized Ethan the moment I saw him. I frowned. From where? Charles sighed. Because 10 years ago, he came to me asking for help. My chest tightened. Ethan? Yes. I couldn't imagine why. Back then Ethan had just graduated college. He was ambitious, confident, full of plans. Charles continued. He wanted investment money. That part made sense. Young entrepreneurs ask for funding all the time. But Charles wasn't finished. He told me his father had built a business worth millions before his death. My breath caught. What? He claimed there were hidden assets tied up in legal disputes. I stared. Daniel never had hidden millions. Never. We struggled after his death because there wasn't much left. Charles nodded as if reading my thoughts. I discovered that quickly. A chill ran through me. Then why are you telling me this now? His expression darkened. Because Ethan didn't stop there. The reception doors opened. Laughter spilled into the hallway. But suddenly none of it mattered. I could feel something terrible approaching. Charles lowered his voice. He forged documents. The world tilted. No, I'm afraid so. I shook my head. My son could be arrogant. Selfish. Even cruel. But forgery? Fraud? No. Charles reached into his jacket. Then handed me a folded document. A copy. Old. Yellowed. I looked down. And immediately recognized the signature. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Someone had copied it. Poorly. The date was 10 years old. My knees nearly gave out. What is this? Charles answered quietly. This is the document Ethan used to convince investors you had guaranteed certain assets. My heart pounded. I couldn't breathe. For several seconds the hallway disappeared. The voices vanished. The music faded. There was only that paper. And the terrible realization forming inside me. My son had forged my name. Years ago. Without telling me. Without asking. Without guilt. I looked up. When did you find out? Charles's jaw tightened. Immediately. Then why didn't you report him? The question escaped before I could stop it. For the first time, Charles looked ashamed. Because he begged me not to. I stared. He said he was desperate. Charles nodded. He said he wanted to make something of himself. A bitter laugh escaped me. The same excuse people always use. As if ambition erases wrongdoing. As if dreams are permission. I gave him a chance. Charles continued. I rejected the investment. I listened silently, but I kept copies. Something in his tone changed. Something heavier. Diana. That was the first time he used my name. I never expected to see him again. I looked toward the reception hall. My son was inside celebrating. Laughing. Smiling. Building a future on foundations I suddenly didn't recognize. Charles followed my gaze. Until today. A knot formed in my stomach. Why today? He answered without hesitation. Because Rebecca's father recently approached my company. My pulse quickened. What does that have to do with Ethan? Everything. Charles looked exhausted, like a man carrying news he didn't want to deliver. They're planning a major merger. The blood drained from my face. A merger. Millions of dollars. Contracts. Investments. Partnerships. The exact kind of deal that could collapse if the wrong truth surfaced. And suddenly I understood. Charles hadn't attended the wedding by accident. He was here because Ethan's past had collided with his future. What happens now? I whispered. Charles looked toward the ballroom. Toward the celebration. Toward the life my son thought he had secured. Then he gave an answer that frightened me more than anything else. That depends. On what? Whether Ethan told them the truth. Deep down, I already knew the answer. He hadn't. The same son who hid his mother in the back row. The same son who forged her signature. The same son who spent years protecting appearances. No, he hadn't told them anything. And if Charles was right, the wedding wasn't the beginning of Ethan's future. It was the final calm moment before everything exploded. As music echoed through the church, Charles slipped a business card into my hand. Then he said something I would remember forever. Your husband was an honest man. I swallowed hard. He was. Charles nodded. Whatever happens next, remember this. His eyes moved toward the ballroom one final time. The truth usually arrives late. A pause. But it always arrives. And 3 hours later, it did. The reception ballroom looked like something from a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White roses covered every table. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Servers carried trays of champagne through the crowd. Every detail screamed money. Rebecca's father had spared no expense. And Ethan looked exactly where he wanted to be. At the center of it all. I stayed near the back of the room. Not hiding. Observing. There is a difference. When you spend years being overlooked, you learn things. You notice who speaks and who listens. Who leads and who follows. Who respects people only when others are watching. Ethan was moving from group to group like a politician during election season. Laughing. Shaking hands. Accepting congratulations. Selling a version of himself. Across the room, Rebecca looked genuinely happy. That was the hardest part. She didn't know. Not yet. I wondered what would happen when she did. Charles stood beside me quietly. He hadn't left. Neither of us had touched the champagne. Neither of us felt much like celebrating. Then the ballroom doors opened. And everything changed. A tall man entered surrounded by 3 executives. The room immediately reacted. Conversations paused. People straightened. Heads turned. Even Ethan stopped talking. That's Arthur Bennett, Charles said. I recognized the name instantly. Arthur Bennett wasn't merely wealthy. He was one of the most powerful businessmen in the state. Construction, real estate, investments. His companies employed thousands. And more importantly, he was Rebecca's father, the father-in-law Ethan had worked so hard to impress. Arthur shook hands with guests as he crossed the room. Then he spotted Charles. For the first time all evening, his expression shifted. Surprise. Then concern. He walked directly toward us. Charles. Charles nodded. Arthur. The 2 men exchanged a brief handshake. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Yet something felt wrong. Arthur looked at Charles the way people look at doctors before receiving bad news. Finally he spoke. You said we needed to talk. Charles glanced toward Ethan, then back to Arthur. We do. Arthur followed his gaze. The smile disappeared from his face. What is this about? Charles didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. A silent question. A final chance to stop what was coming. I thought about the church. The back row. The shame. The years of silence. Then I nodded. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was tired of protecting lies. Charles turned back to Arthur. What do you know about Ethan's first company? Arthur frowned. Very little. Did you perform a full background review? The question seemed simple, but Arthur's face immediately hardened. Why? Charles answered carefully. Because I believe there are things you should see before signing anything. A chill spread through the air between them. Arthur looked toward Ethan again. This time with suspicion. Businessmen understand risk, and nothing creates risk faster than hidden history. Show me. Charles handed him the folder. The same folder that contained copies of the forged documents. The same folder that had haunted me for the last 3 hours. Arthur opened it. His eyes moved across the first page. Then the second. Then the third. His expression changed, slowly, like storm clouds gathering over water. The executives behind him exchanged nervous glances. No one spoke. For nearly a minute. Finally Arthur looked up. What is this? Charles answered. Evidence. Arthur stared at me, then at Charles, then back at the documents. Are these authentic? Charles nodded. I verified them personally. The room around us continued celebrating. Nobody nearby understood what was happening. But the future of several lives was already changing. Arthur closed the folder. Very carefully, very quietly, the way people handle something dangerous. Excuse me. Then he walked away, straight toward Ethan. My stomach tightened. Charles exhaled slowly. It's beginning. I couldn't look away. Across the ballroom, Ethan saw Arthur approaching. He smiled immediately, confident, relaxed, certain, the kind of certainty that only exists before disaster. Arthur stopped in front of him. The smile vanished. Guests nearby sensed tension and drifted away. Rebecca noticed next, then her mother. Within seconds a small circle formed. People pretending not to watch. Watching anyway. Arthur said something. Ethan laughed. Then Arthur opened the folder. And handed him the documents. Everything changed. Even from across the room I could see the blood drain from Ethan's face. His posture collapsed. His confidence disappeared. Rebecca leaned closer, trying to understand. Arthur spoke again, this time louder, not shouting, worse, calm, cold, controlled, the voice of a man who had already reached a conclusion. Rebecca took the papers. She read. Her eyes widened. Then she looked at Ethan. The way strangers look at each other. Not husband and wife. Not newlyweds. Strangers. A terrible silence spread through their group. Guests were noticing now. Music continued, but conversations faded. People sensed drama. People always do. Then Rebecca spoke. Even from across the room I could hear her. Is this true? Ethan answered immediately. Too quickly. No. A mistake. Because innocent people ask questions. Guilty people deny. Arthur's expression darkened. Charles noticed it too. He's panicking, he murmured. Rebecca looked at the documents again. Then back at Ethan. Tell me the truth. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Ethan did something unexpected. He looked directly at me. Across the ballroom, past hundreds of guests, past years of history, directly at me, and in that instant, I knew. He thought I had done this. He thought I had betrayed him. The sad part? He still didn't understand. Truth isn't betrayal. Lies only survive because someone keeps carrying them. And I was finally too tired to carry his. Ethan started walking toward me, fast, angry, desperate. The crowd parted. People sensed trouble. Rebecca called his name. He ignored her. Arthur told him to stop. He didn't listen. Within seconds he was standing in front of me. His face pale, his breathing uneven, his perfect wedding unraveling around him. You did this. The words came out as a whisper. Not because he was calm. Because he was terrified. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. And for the first time in years, I saw a frightened little boy hiding inside a grown man's arrogance. No, Ethan. His jaw clenched. Don't lie to me. I shook my head slowly. The truth did this. For a second I thought he might argue. Instead his eyes shifted toward Charles. And something inside him broke. Because now he understood. The secret he buried 10 years ago had never disappeared. It had simply waited. And the worst part was still coming. Because Arthur Bennett had not yet finished reading the entire file. And hidden near the bottom was a document that would reveal something far more dangerous than forgery. Something capable of destroying not only Ethan's reputation, but his entire business empire.